All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Human. My name is Mark Champagne, and it's my job to unpack the mental fitness practices and stories of people living at the top of their game personally and professionally. Today we have a special treat, an in-person treat. Hannah's here with us, and she is a dancer of liberation. I love that already. Driven to support others in accessing their own through the innate wisdom of their bodies. She is the founder of Somaya, a meditative movement method that releases stagnation and takes us into higher states of consciousness. She is also the director of programming at Holos Costa Rica, a retreat space and holistic community with indigenous traditional medicines at the center. Hannah began as a professional dancer and became a somatic healer through her own academic and personal healing journey. Through her development of Somaya, she healed herself of Crohn's disease. Since then, she's shared the practice around the globe and expanded to include preparation and integration of psychedelic medicine journeys. I mean, that's fun. Right?
Thank you.
That's fun.
It's really funny to hear that read to me.
Well, it's a pretty exciting journey. It seems like you've been on quite the ride.
Yeah.
So, before we get into that, everyone gets the same question. So I've got to flip it to you first as well. And it's just, titles aside and like your story and all of that aside, just who are you today?
Whoa. That's a really big question. It's a multi-layered question. Who am I today? I think every day I'm an extension of nature. My body is an extension of nature. It's also the home for my spirit and the seat of the observer, which observes my body. But I've moved from a place of identifying just with my spirit being housed in my body to actually really identifying with my body itself, because my body is the way that I get to interface with this world. It's the way that my spirit gets to touch and taste and smell and dance and love and fall in love and laugh and all the beautiful parts about what it is to be human in this body. And then being human in this body, I feel like I get to play with various characteristics and archetypes of what it is to be human every day. So who am I in this body changes from day to day. And I think today I'm a much more introverted version of myself. I'm a really grateful version of myself, and I feel deep contentment in this moment.
Wow. That was unreal.
Yeah.
I've asked that question 350 or so times now, and I have to say that was probably one of the most powerful responses. But I'm also not surprised, given the work that you do and given what I know about you. It's you can clearly tell that answer came from a deeper place.
Thank you.
I'm curious how you would have answered that question, kind of the short version of it, 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
What a great question. Oh, what a great question. Where was I 10 years ago? College. I'd probably answer it very academically.
Okay.
I'm a dancer. I'm an artist. I'm a seeker. I'm a student. Yeah, it would have been much more of a left brain externally facing identification.
The vast majority of the population would answer in that way, just FYI.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It totally makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that journey kind of post-college, and just, I know a lot of your work and your story starts with dance.
Yeah.
And continues to be dance in many ways, but I guess a different version of kind of what you thought. So what was, how did you back into being a professional dancer? And like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. Long story or short story?
We got nothing but time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Long story. I was 2 years old.
Okay.
And there was a thing called Blockbuster at the time.
Yeah, I remember Blockbuster.
Yeah, you go and you rent like VHSs.
Yeah, we're officially old.
Yeah, exactly. What the heck? So my parents took me to Blockbuster, and I picked the Michael Jackson's Thriller VHS and took it home. My parents put it in the TV for me, and I could not stop watching Thriller and just rewinding it and picking up the dance moves and dancing to it. I mean, like hours and hours and days and days. And finally, my parents were like, all right, this girl needs to dance. Let's put her in dance class. And I just fell madly in love with it. And we tried other things like swimming and gymnastics, and all I wanted to do was dance. And so I don't know that I chose to dance as much as dance has just been this innate part of me. And thankfully, I had parents who saw and nurtured that, helped me nurture that. And I started dancing competitively around 6. And then at 9 years old, I auditioned for the Debbie Allen Dance Academy. And I got accepted into the academy. My parents couldn't afford to send me to that school. And so Debbie Allen, Miss Allen, put me on a full scholarship. And so from the time that I was 9 to 16, 17, I trained 40 hours a week for free. Okay. And that began the really kind of rigorous dance training. And Miss Allen took me to Italy when I was 9 to do a tribute to Rudolph Nuria for Italian television. And that was kind of my first experience as a professional dancer with my mentor, Miss Allen.
How was that? How did you feel?
Oh, it was incredible. I felt so honored, and it was just so much fun as a 9-year-old getting to go to Italy with a few of my dance friends and my mentor, and ate so much gelato and so much pasta. And we got to go to Rudolph Nuriyev's private home on a private island off of the Costa Positano. And today it feels like an absolute dream. And that definitely marked a pivotal moment in my life and in my dance career. And I thought that I would pursue professional dance as an art form, as a performer for the rest of my life, until something else happened that also changed my life pretty dramatically and marked another pivot point for me in my career.
Okay. Well, so we're obviously going to get to that. But I do have to ask, because I think like any childhood, what's the right way to phrase that? Like childhood actors, dancers, like really anyone that starts so, I guess, aggressively or with such, focus at a young age like that. Athletes, you see that as well, obviously. Yeah. Like, I'm just curious, while you were going through that, were you enjoying everything? Were you like, oh, my friends don't do this? Like, what was that like?
Phenomenal question. There were moments I enjoyed it thoroughly. There were moments I developed pretty profound resentment toward dance and the amount of rigor and training that it took. I was in high school, I took mostly AP classes. Okay. And was dancing again 40 hours a week. And so that was my whole life. It was my academic world and dance, and that was it. I never went to summer camp. I didn't have the kind of life that I think most middle schoolers and high schoolers have. And my body was under incredible strain for the majority of my preteen and teen years. And so I'll share and my mind. Yeah, absolutely. And I would get home at like 10 p.m. and then have 3-4 hours of homework, and then would wake up at 6-7 a.m. and do it all over again. And yeah, it was really challenging. But then there were these moments. I remember I was in modern class and I was cheneying, like spinning across the floor. And I felt time completely slow down. And I felt catapulted into the present. And colors were much more vibrant. Lights were much brighter. And it was almost as if like time actually didn't exist in that moment. And it was one of the first moments of my life that I felt deeply connected to something so much greater than me, something that felt like it existed outside of myself, but also deep within myself. And so dance brought me into that space. And so even though there were moments of extreme stress, dance brought me to the most divine place. And it continued to bring me there over and over again. And moments like that continued to make the rigor worth it.
Yeah. Well, and I imagine too, like it kind of set up your journey right now.
Yeah.
Which it seems like there's probably a lot of those divine moments or more.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't ever experience those moments.
Yeah.
It's interesting how that kind of all comes full circle.
Yeah.
So what was, just so the listeners don't send me hate mail, what was that moment that changed your path and your vision of being a professional dancer?
Yeah. A very clear demarcation for myself and my identity and my desires in life was when I was 16. Miss Allen brought me and a few other American dancers to Oman, which is a country in the Middle East. And she was the cultural ambassador of the US at the time under the Obama administration. And so we were sent to Oman to bridge gaps between Omani and American culture through dance. And the experience really changed my life. I don't speak any Arabic, and the men that I met in Oman didn't speak any English, but they were break dancers, and we Americans were dancers, and we communicated through movement and song and music and learning each other's prayers through body language. And the journey shifted my relationship with dance from being just a performing art to being a tool for personal and collective healing and cultural bridging. And from that moment forward, it started to feel almost disassociative for me to perform on stage, because dance took on a whole new meaning in my body and my heart and in my mind. And so I had these plans to go to a conservatory like NYU, for example, and just really continue my dance training.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that anymore. It felt like a lie when I started applying for conservatory programs. And so I ended up finding this incredible program at UCLA called World Arts and Cultures with a dance concentration that studied the arts from various cultures around the world throughout history. And that felt right. And so I applied for that program, got in, and then also decided to study psychobiology. And in my psychobiology courses at UCLA, I started learning about the works of doctors like Dr. Candace Pert, who discovered that the body actually stores memory on a neuropeptide level in our cells and our tissues and our organs and our nervous system. And so when we experience a traumatic event, that's not just getting stored neurologically in our brains, it's actually getting stored as memory inside of our bodies. And so I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with this new kind of academic footing and this reshaping of my relationship with dance. But then out of college, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and felt really badly for myself for a couple weeks.
Sure.
And then realized that it was actually a profound opportunity for me to test what I'd been learning and experiencing in my life on my own body to heal myself. And that was really the inception of what is now Somaya, the somatic healing method that I developed.
I mean, just hearing it, obviously, in retrospect, it just seems like almost like such a perfect flow of events. But I can imagine, and probably is, but I can also imagine there was some stress there. Like when you weren't going to NYU in the fall, like how were your parents with that?
Mm-hmm.
How were you I mean, I know there was an alignment thing that you could feel, but at the same time, like you've probably gathered an identity in a way, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of had to let that go or let it morph into what it needed to morph into, and you trust that that was the right path. Like, how did you manage all of that?
Yeah, totally. It's a funny thing in the moments. In certain moments, life can feel like, what the heck? And then a year from that moment or 2 years from that moment, it, like you said, it all kind of comes together as if it's this beautiful puzzle piece forming. But sometimes we can't see the forest if we're too close to the tree. And often in life, we're very close to the tree. And when I was really close to the tree in those moments, it was definitely difficult. I think so much of life is actually dying to our past. And I think what really helps me, though, in dying to past identities and shedding past identities is I used to think that life was to become something or to strive to be something and continue to put on layers and layers and layers until I became the thing that I wanted to become. And what's really helped me and what I believe is closer to my truth is that I am not really here to become anything. I'm actually here to strip away all of the stuff that I'm not in order to return to the truth of who I am.
Profound.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think in those moments of like, what am I doing? How do I shift this identity or it's just a matter of, for me, being still and just letting myself molt and shed and letting that part of myself die. And the beautiful thing about death is it's fertilizer for new life. So I think in those moments, it was the first kind of big identity death that I had, which was really, really painful. But I think the more I have, the better at dying I get. So it becomes easier and easier because it feels like another chance to dream. It feels like another chance to welcome in more life.
Did you have practices that were helpful or journaling prompts?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know we really bond over the journaling. Yes, dance and writing are my two passions of life. And journaling, for sure, thank you for bringing that up, has been a gateway for me to let go and to understand what it is I'm letting go of and to give myself permission and safety to just...
You just free write to get it started, or like what helps? Because there's a lot, I and thanks for being open to go here. Just there's a lot of people listening, and myself included, that it's the prompts help, right? And we all go through, we all have these experiences, but often like have a hard time letting go. And to your point, it's like the opposite of what you're describing, and we're putting on more and more and taking more in and whatnot until you reach this like crazy breaking point usually, right? So my goal is always like, how can we, not that the breaking points are bad because they teach us a lot, obviously, but also just, is there ways to release some of the pressure and the mental like turmoil and struggle that we put ourselves through when we're trying to go through that kind of death process of identity and whatnot? So I'm just curious, when you're journaling, like, were there any prompts that came to mind that you can remember, or even that you use now when you go through this process?
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah. Oh, I love this question so much. I think for me, it's been the combination of movement and free writing. So for example, if I were to get out a journal right now and start writing, it wouldn't be as powerful for me and my system and my body and my mind had I first put on some music and danced for 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
And then exhausted myself, and then opened up a journal and started free writing. And so that practice during that time throughout my life was really big. It was inviting movement into my life. And right after moving some things through my body, writing. And it almost feels like when I'm moving, it's like sifting things out of me and creating more space for my mind to process what I'm experiencing. And then the journaling was like an outlet to release the residual from my mind onto the page and almost allow whatever cycle I was releasing to come to completion through my body and through my mind onto the page. The other thing that really helped, or the other person and his words that really, really helped during that time and continue to help me to this day, David Whyte, reading David Whyte poetry.
Okay.
He has this one piece. It's actually not a poem, but it's more like an essay about heartbreak. And it's about embracing heartbreak as a friend. Like so much of our life, many humans kind of like to dance around heartbreak and do whatever they can to avoid it. But the reality is so much of life leads to heartbreak, whether it's actually ending a love relationship, or it's a grieving a lost loved one, or it's even in the happiest of marriages that lasts for 30, 50 years, we experience heartbreak. And so the more we can embrace heartbreak as a friend and a teacher, and we can celebrate it as a way to stretch us into more love, the more we can embrace life. And so reading David Whyte and then dancing and then journaling, that seemed to be a recipe for success, to be able to accept whatever pain I was going through, move it through my body, and then write it in a way that lended itself to some feeling of completion.
Hello, friends. Given you're here, I'm making the assumption that you're motivated to be mentally fit. So with that in mind, I want to let you know about the Better Questions newsletter, which publishes once or twice a month, providing all of us the opportunity to slow down, think, and ask better questions. As you know, quality questions are my thing, and this is an opportunity to share the prompts I've studied and curated to help our minds be healthier, clearer, more intentional, and expand our mental capacity. You can sign up over at behindthehuman.com/newsletter, which will also give you a preview of my debut book, Personal Socrates. That's behindthehuman.com/newsletter. Now back to the show. So how do you, for people that don't have a dance background, let's say, how do you help guide people into movement in this kind of situation? Because like I even think of myself, like it just feels like awkward, right? And so I'm curious because I love any kind of practice or idea around almost like prepping our mind to then release, right? Like, and the same thing for me. Journaling is the thing that I think we resonate with that, or on that one together, where it's helpful to release and process. But I often use breath work first as well to just kind of set it up. And same thing when working with teams. And it's we start in the reflection a lot deeper. Yeah. So for movement, how do you guide people into that? Like what would be, what's the method? Is it just do what you feel like it? Like what is it? This is probably your method, I'm assuming, or parts of it.
Yeah. With Somaya, how we start is, well, if someone feels uncomfortable with the word dance, then I just won't use dance. I'll just say movement. Because we're all, in a way, moving all the time with our body language, the way that we walk down the street, the way that we gesticulate when we talk, all of that is expression through our bodies. And so I think it's innate to us being in bodies as humans. So I think just taking away the label dance really helps. Yeah. And then I'll also, within the method or with clients that I'm working with, I always start by taking people into their own bodies and what they're experiencing in their bodies through neurolinguistic programming, a little bit of kind of hypnotherapy, but really doing a body scan of like checking in. Our bodies are constantly speaking to us. Every moment of every day, our bodies are speaking to us. It's just a matter of, are we listening?
Yeah.
Are we taking the time to tune in?
Or ignoring those signs
exactly.
all the time, right?
Exactly. Because society is constructed in a way that pulls us outward in many ways instead of looking, inward. And so I'll give people the invitation to turn inward. What's happening with the sensations of your body today? Where is breath moving through your body in a way that feels free and expansive? Where might you be feeling some contractions in the body? And contractions might be in the form of physical pain. They might also be in the form of energetic kind of constriction or hollowness. Sometimes a lot of people I work with, myself included, sometimes it can feel like a kind of pit in my solar plexus, like a black hole in the space between my rib cage. And when that's happening, like, what does it mean? What is our body trying to tell us? Maybe sometimes there's tension in the heart space or a blockage in the throat. And so really I start with just, hey, what's going on in your body? And I help people really go there through various kind of language and various inquiries. Does that feeling you're experiencing have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Sometimes it has a sound that it wants to make. And then it's similar to parts work in that, like internal family systems work, in that we'll take whatever part is speaking to us most loudly in the body, and that's what we'll play with. What does that part need from you today to experience release? Sometimes it just needs to be acknowledged. Other times it needs sound. Other times it wants to shake. Other times it's craving just stillness. And stillness is a beautiful part of the dance, of the practice.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just a matter of creating the container for people to go within and listen to whatever their body is telling them and whatever their body needs in that moment, and then moving from there. And yeah.
I love it. So for people listening, let's say they wanted to do this tomorrow morning. Would your suggestion or flow be just at least give people a bit of a taste, be the kind of like close your eyes and just do a body scan, see where there might be some tension or something is being called out to you, and just put focus there, and then just basically, I guess the big thing is to do everything after this step to like release self-judgment.
Yeah.
Right. And just like you said, if it requires stillness, or if you need to get up and like shake or move, like close your eyes and just like fucking let it go.
Yeah.
Like, right.
Totally.
Okay.
I love that. The self-judgment is a really big one. And I'm really glad you brought that up. It's a really, really important point. And even I go through that as a dancer and someone, and then sometimes I move my body and I'm like, ooh, that's weird. And there's that little voice that's like, oh, that's not weird. That's just, it's great. It's release. It's freedom, but it's still there. And the thing that helps me, and the thing that I share sometimes with people, is replace the judgment with the curiosity of a 3-year-old. Just get like deeply, deeply curious, as if you were 3 years old again.
Yeah.
And explore whatever's going on in the body and whatever wants to happen in the body with the curiosity of a 3-year-old. And that seems to help.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to try that myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. The questions from a 3-year-old, even I have a 7-year-old as well.
Yeah.
And like, even the amount of questions, and it's like, the thing that always stumps me is like, that's a really good question. I actually don't know. I don't know. And I never thought to ask that question. And that is the one that always just like lights me up as a dad, seeing these kids just having not been like brainwashed yet to not ask questions.
Yeah.
And it's just like a beautiful experience. So I love that. If we can go back to it, aren't we all just like trying to get back in some level or form, kind of what you're saying about who am I? Mm-hmm. Stripping all the stuff away and getting back to like our true selves.
Yeah.
Which we're born curious.
Yeah.
You know, without judgment and without all of this stuff that, you know, we layer on. And if we can get back to that place, seems like a pretty happy place.
I agree.
Right?
Very much.
Yeah.
And I love that about your work too, is the questions that you ask people and that you ask the world and that you ask yourself support us in returning to that truth. And it also sounds like you just mentioned your son. Sounds like he takes after you in that way, asking really beautiful, potent questions, and that you're really incredible mirrors for each other. It's really sweet share.
Doing my best, that's for sure.
Great, Mark. You're doing so good.
So how did you heal the Crohn's? I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
How did you, like, where did you even start? I guess what gave you mentally the permission to say, okay, thanks, Western medicine. I know there are solutions in that world, but that's not good enough for me.
Yeah. Profound pain, physical and emotional pain. When I was hospitalized, my inflammation was all in my small intestine. And so that's water absorption. I was incredibly dehydrated. I was in phenomenal pain. And the hospital really wanted to pump me with a bunch of steroids and antibiotics. And my body said no. And so I just listened to that. But for 2 weeks at home in severe dehydration and severe physical and emotional pain, I felt fairly desperate until I just decided to open my computer and research. And I decided to research small intestine meridian, so the energy pathway for the small intestine. And the meridian system is rooted in ancient Chinese medicine. And I had also remembered that the one thing that really, really, really helped a lot of my dance injuries was acupuncture. And working with this incredible doctor who ended up mentoring me in understanding the meridian systems. And I found out really quickly that the small intestine meridian is directly paired with the heart meridian. So when we're not processing something in our heart, that for me, I'll speak in first person, I was literally suppressing that, pushing that energy downward into my small intestine, not processing, not absorbing those feelings. And it was creating severe inflammation in my small intestine. And this came from, I lost a lot of friends very young. I have a lot of family members with fairly severe addiction and suicidal tendencies. And I was also the person who really put it upon myself as a very young child to keep everybody in my family safe. So I didn't really have space to process.
It's a lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. And a lot of like, I need to hold it together for the people in my life. And then I went through a really, really devastating breakup with someone who is still one of my best friends today. But at the time, I was just totally heartbroken. And that's what really landed me in the hospital. And so very, very clear what I wasn't processing in my heart was getting stored in my small intestine. And so I started to play with this information with neurolinguistic programming, taking myself into scanning my body, specifically this place of inflammation, communing with the space in my body, asking, what do you need to release? What do you need to absorb? And I started like processing those unfelt, repressed emotions from my heart into my small intestine.
How did you do that?
I mapped out the course of my life and looked at pretty much every age I'd experienced severe inflammation in my gut. And mapped it to what I hadn't processed in my heart and gave myself permission to finally process and move through that. As I did that, I started creating movements, like dance movements, along those meridian lines. So the small intestine and heart meridian moving up through my abdomen, out through my shoulder and elbow and left pinky, and combining that with breath and emotional release. And through that process, very quickly, my inflammation went down. I started getting hydrated again. And I also noticed that my general well-being went up. And from there, I started working with other meridian systems, the spleen and the stomach, the kidney and the bladder, etc. And I created a cohesive methodology that works with breath, neurolinguistic programming, movement along the meridian lines, and emotional release. And that is now Somaya.
Wow. That's incredible.
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank
and
you.
Like, it's just so, like, this isn't to knock Western medicine. There are places, of course, but it's just, I'm always so amazed to hear and experience, like, there's just so many other options that if we can just be still enough to ask the questions and then of course put the work in. Cause I mean, you know, like, I don't want to downplay the timeline, and I can only imagine, you know, that was probably really hard to go back and in a way relive some of those experiences to then process and release them and whatnot. Like, you've got to put in that work, but there are other options. Like we've become so conditioned to, no, it's just this way, or this is the comfortable way. Yeah. When there's just modalities and things that have existed. I mean, you're combining a whole bunch of really incredible modalities and practices, but like some of these things have been around since like the beginning of time. Like, why are we giving them more attention? Yeah. Right? It's wild. I have to ask, like, through some of your client work, and especially on retreats as well, like, are there any, I mean, you can keep it confidential, of course, but any other like wild kind of experiences that you could share, just to provide a different perspective and like, hey, this is possible?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I also, as you were just sharing, you said something about getting still enough to ask the questions. Sometimes we just have to get still enough to ask the questions. And I just wanted to pin that because I really love that a lot. And I'm curious around how you get still to ask the questions you do, because they're so potent. And yeah.
You want me to answer that one?
I would love to, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is, for me at least, it is a bit of a dance, because it's, I think it's doing, for me, whatever I can from a mental fitness perspective, and that just encompasses a bunch of different practices that feel right in the moment. And I've mentioned breath work and journaling, of course, but there's physical fitness, there's walks. And sometimes, like, this happened yesterday, it felt like the calendar, the schedule was just busy. And I had a few key things that I wanted to accomplish. And I remember I had 20 minutes before an interview. And there was a moment there of just like a breath of, okay, I could check off probably, I can't remember what the item was on the to-do list, and then basically log into the interview 3 minutes before. Or, and I'm happy I did this, because then I felt so much better, because the rest of the day I felt like I was just trying to basically survive. I mean, that's a bit dramatic, obviously, but, you know, it was in that state of just trying to catch up and stay afloat. Yeah. So in the 20 minutes instead, I just laid on the ground and paid attention to my breath, which I think, like, I mean, it gave me obviously something out of that, but the way I was trying to look at it is, I have this interview with an individual that's taken time out of their day to come on and speak about their journey and whatnot. And like, I owe them that level of presence. Yeah. You know? And it, again, for me, it doesn't always feel like the natural thing to do. And I think it's because we're just surrounded by the opposite of that all the time. So I try to be present or mindful of when I'm feeling like there's a lot going on, just know that there are solutions to just breathe or take a walk, you know, without like the conscious thing of taking a walk without a podcast or an audiobook or to, learn or whatever, and just kind of listen of what is, you talking about like, what does my body need? I'm like, what does my mind need right now? And again, this happened the other day too. It felt like it needed a hike at the mountain over here in the morning instead of like a weight session to start the day. So I did that. And so that, I mean, it's interesting because I guess it's pausing to listen, to then be more still, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So.
I love that. I love the level of attunement that you have to what your mind needs to get still. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I think it's a skill and a practice. It's something you're so exceptional at and teach people, thankfully.
I appreciate that, but I was going to say, like, that's the thing. And that's I think why I like the language or the language of mental fitness resonates, because, people can get good at running as well if you train and put in the work. And for me, it's just been, 15 years now at this point of studying these practices and having conversations like what you and I are having to, okay, I'm going to try the movement piece before journaling. And, maybe that might work for someone else as well. Or that for me personally might work in a very specific situation. And then we just have a list of tools always available.
Yeah.
No matter what the situation is. And I think that's the thing that lights me up so much about this work or the mission behind it, and that there's a whole bunch of different projects that you and I have been talking about. It's all just to make this stuff accessible.
Yeah.
Because there's so much mental suffering that I really don't think would be there if people had even a fraction of these tools and just had 10 minutes a day of some sort of mindfulness or mental fitness practice. And the ripple effect of that would be beneficial for everyone.
Yeah.
And do we not deserve that,
Totally.
So, yeah.
Totally.
Sorry, that was a long-winded answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back to you. What other experiences have really implanted in your mind of, I guess, made you feel proud that you went down and followed your own journey to make your incredible work accessible to people? Yeah.
I have a very, very, very specific one that came to mind when you asked. And I built out a program out of safe houses in a state in the U.S. And so I was working with women who are coming out of very, very, very violent, abusive relationships. I was also working with some women who are coming out of being sex trafficked. And the program that I developed was really thorough and started out very, very gently. It was for 12 weeks. And it was about week 3, if I'm remembering correctly. And at the end of the session, and it was a group workshop with these women, there was one woman who was crying. And as she was crying, she had a huge smile on her face. And she came over to me after the workshop and she told me her story, which was really intense. A very violent relationship for about 25 years.
Wow.
That led to severe skull fractures, that then led to developing brain cancer, that then led to alcoholism because of all the suffering. And she came over to me and said, this is the first time in about 30 years that I have felt safe and alive in my body. And she also had numbness actually in her left pinky that had been there for about 25 years. And she said she had sensation back in her pinky finger. And in that moment, I held it together and hugged her and was like, yes, wow. And then I got in the car, started driving, couldn't drive, pulled over. I was shaking.
Yeah.
And just wept. And it was one of those moments of fully realizing that I was living at the center of my dharma and why I'm here on this planet. And there were so many moments prior that were so difficult. Like, what the heck am I doing? I'm now also like a CEO of like growing this business. What is that? It was so stressful. All of the business sides, the financial sides of it. I was actually kind of at the point of almost giving up. And then that moment happened. I was like, okay, it is all worth it.
Yeah.
And it was also one of those moments. It's like, I think I could die tomorrow and be stoked.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of the best moments of my life.
How do you pull that moment back? You know, if you think about present day right now, because you and I have talked about this, and I find this is a bit of a theme in the general space that we're in, where it's, for the most part, many people are doing this work to help others, right?
Yeah.
And there's like a real noble cause there. But you alluded to the fact, like, we are running our own businesses, and there's realities to that, and we have to live and all of that. So, like, what's the balance that you've struck, or how do you manage those two worlds?
Yeah, really good question. More patience and gentleness with myself. I've heard this term before. I'm not coining this at all, but it lands for me, a recovering perfectionist. So at the time that I was just sharing during that story, I was really in perfectionist mode, Hannah.
Okay.
And I've since unlearned some of that. I'm still recovering. I'm still learning.
You're human.
We're human. We're human. And it's a beautiful thing to be human in this body. And it's also really challenging sometimes. And what has made it less challenging for me is just being patient and gentle with myself and allowing myself to make mistakes and learn from them, and to also saying, I need help. I need help. I don't know how to do this, or I'm stretched way too thin, or I'm taking a mental health day and I'm going to be away from my computer and my phone completely. And that has helped significantly. What used to happen is I would push and push and push and push myself. I think because I'd practiced this, I'd exercised this push muscle so much as a dancer. I would push and push and push and push until I was totally burnt out. And now I can notice symptoms of impending burnout before I get there. And that looks like, I'm an extroverted introvert. And so what that looks like for me when I'm leading up to burnout is I don't want to see people. I just want to be with the trees all the time. And so when that starts to happen, I'm like, okay, I really just need to take some time for myself or time away from technology. If I don't listen to that and I continue to work with clients or do workshops or work, like at Holos, we are working as a team, work in person with team members, then I would just continue to walk toward burnout. The other thing that would happen is my mind would start to run really rapidly in the evenings instead of decompress. And so when that starts to happen, I'm like, okay, I'm reaching burnout.
Yeah.
And so
then you don't
now,
sleep well either. It's just it's a terrible loop.
Exactly. It becomes a cycle. And so I know what to notice now.
Okay.
And I can make the shifts in real time before it gets too far. And as I do that, again, just being gentle and patient with myself. And like you said, having certain tools and practices, they really come in handy. And for me, that's having a morning routine.
Talk to me. Yeah.
Wake up, have my morning matcha, listen to some really beautiful music, drink my matcha outside, journal while I drink my matcha, taking the dog for a walk, exercising, maybe doing some yoga, and then having a dance practice, and then journaling again before I even check one thing off my to-do list.
Okay.
If I have my morning practice, I'm pretty much okay.
Yeah.
If I don't have my morning practice, it's questionable. Stress may hit. So
it's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone can hear this just as I am. I mean, you strike me, and you've put in the work to do this, of course, but you seem incredibly in tune with yourself, your body, your spirit, like just the whole package. And it's really beautiful to, as someone looking in from the outside, to experience. Have you ever thought, given you have gone through this journey, what it would be like if you were to go back to professional dancing in this state of Hannah and dance from this place?
Whoa, I have never thought of that. I don't think I would. I think I would say no so immediately to the way that I would be expected to treat my body.
Wow.
Yeah. With that, could I maybe start a company that has different parameters around what rehearsing looks like? Possibly. That's really interesting. Oh, you planted some seeds there. Because there is, my partner is a performer. He's a musician, singer, songwriter. And he's on big stages all the time. And I see him on stage and it's so beautiful. And I see how his music impacts the people listening and brings them so much joy and beauty. And I see how he shines on stage and how he's like so home in himself when he's performing. And there is a part of me that misses that. A part of me, not a big part of me, but a part of me. And so maybe there's something there to explore around performing from where I am now, but in a totally different kind of contextual world around dance.
Well, I would sign up for that. Can I buy the first ticket?
Absolutely. It'd be an honor. I'll let you know.
Amazing. Well, last question for you. I mean, we could speak for hours.
I know. I know.
What makes you smile each day?
Conversations like these, new connections like these that are blossoming into sweet friendships, and trees. Oh gosh, trees. I really love trees. It's actually
I'm
insane.
with you on that.
Yeah. I've also noticed that specifically weeping willow trees.
My favorite.
Right?
Yeah.
When I go past one or sit under one or see one, there's something that happens to my body and my system that doesn't happen with anything else in the world. It's like this warmth in my heart that radiates out through my entire body, and I immediately feel like safe and cocooned.
Yeah. Well, it's like the tree that gives you the big hug.
Yeah, it's the hugging tree. It's the best. So trees really make me smile. My partner has a 3-year-old son, almost 4. Spending time with him makes me smile. When I think of him, I smile. From a place that I've never smiled before. And dance. Dancing for myself and no one else. That's kind of the interesting paradox of the question of what you just shared is there's part of me that misses being on stage, but most of me feels lit up when I'm dancing alone. And it's just me for myself, in my body, for my spirit. And then getting to impart that invitation to other people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end. I mean, thank you. Thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation and being so open and vulnerable and just sharing your story. But a higher thank you for just following your intuition and those whispers, because the ripple effect of that is helping so many people, like that woman that, you shifted, or that felt safe for the first time in like 30 years. That's something to be really grateful for. And I'm just grateful to know you and see where our friendship goes, of course, as well. So thank you.
Thank Thank you. Me too. I'm so grateful for this connection and your questions and the really thoughtful work that you do, and also your ability to really see people and support people in feeling safe to open up to you and to all the people who listen to this beautiful kind of world that you've cultivated for yourself and us to be a part of.
That lands right in the heart. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.